Welcome to Point Loma Podcast. This is I'm RO, by the way. This is Pastor Karla. Who am I? And we are on episode 6?
6.
Oh my gosh. Okay, and so we are on episode 6 of our study, our walk through Revelation. I guess we're kind of going really slow through Revelation, but it's a walk. So this is based on the Bible study that Pastor Karla did with the Women's Bible Study back in 2023, and now we're bringing it to you. So you're welcome, maybe? Yes, I think you are welcome. So last week we started looking at the messages to the churches of Asia Minor, and we looked at Church of Ephesus, Smyrna, and Pergamum, and this week we're only going to do 2 more. So last time was a little long. We're going to go a little shorter this time, and then we'll finish it up next time. Here you go, Karla. You take over now.
All right. So just a reminder, the context for this book is the Roman Empire, and Revelation speaks against empire, capital E, but it also speaks against the ordinary empire, which Michael Gorman in his book describes as the everyday evils, injustices, and misguided allegiances that are with us daily. It's so important. Followers of Christ had to choose under the Roman Empire between Jesus as Lord versus Caesar as Lord, and it affected every area of their lives. We still are invited to choose Jesus as Lord. It doesn't affect every area of our lives, though,
right,
when we also abide by the government. But as a result, John did not write Revelation, we always have to remember this, to manufacture a crisis for people complacent against the empire. Complacency against the empire was the crisis. And so we are also complacent as Americans against the empire, our American empire. And we don't even know it. We're not even aware. And so just a reminder, you have to go back and listen to the podcast to hear about anything else. But chapter 1 basically set up for us the glorified and risen Christ and all the characteristics that Christ has. And we see these letters to the churches because the context is a letter. It's written for people during a certain time, that the pieces of this risen Christ are shown throughout all of the letters. And so once again, there were 7 churches in Asia Minor, which just means completeness, complete wholeness. And we must remember that the church is an incredibly important and essential part of the plan of God. We are not ancillary, we are essential. So if you recall from last week, these letters are best described as prophetic oracles. And one of our commentators expressed these as potentially
imperial edicts.
That's right, which meant what?
It's basically spoken and it's going to come into play. It's a law that when someone that is delivered by the king himself or a representative of the king. So it has authority of the king.
Right. So these letters would have been incredibly subversive because no one goes against the Roman Empire.
Right.
Nobody is anybody but Caesar. So if they came in this form, then when the churches receive them, these small churches scattered throughout Asia Minor, they'd be like, oh, we have a king that's not Caesar. And that king is God. And so last week, as you mentioned, we looked at Ephesus, who were really good at dispelling evil from their midst, but had lost their love for one another.
Yep.
We looked at Smyrna, who was being persecuted by both the Roman Empire and the Jews, and they were told to keep going. There was no condemnation. And we looked at Pergamum, who lived in the shadow of what was known as the throne of Satan, which we believe was Zeus's altar.
Right.
They were told to remain faithful, don't assimilate, because some were going that direction out of fear of martyrdom.
The ultimate imperial cult. So
that's right. Yeah. And so this week, 2 churches, as you've said. So do you want to start reading for us chapter 2, verse 18?
All right. And to the angel of the church in Thyatira write, these are the words of the Son of God, who has eyes like the flame of fire and whose feet are like burnished bronze. I know your works, your love, faith, service, and patient endurance. I know that your last works are greater than the first. But I have this against you. You tolerate that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophet and is teaching and beguiling my servants to practice fornication and to eat food sacrificed to idols. I gave her time to repent, but she refuses to repent of her fornication. Beware, I am throwing her on a bed, and those who commit adultery with her I am throwing into great distress, unless they repent of her doings. And I will strike her children dead, and all the churches will know that I am the one who searches minds and hearts, and I will give to each of you as your works deserve. But to the rest of you in Thyatira who do not hold this teaching, who have not learned what some call the deep things of Satan, to you I say, I do not lay on you any other burden. Only hold fast to what you have until I come. To everyone who conquers and continues to do my works to the end, I will give authority over the nations to rule them with an iron rod, as when clay pots are shattered, even as I also received authority from my Father. To the one who conquers, I will also give the morning star. Let anyone who has an ear to listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches.
Great.
Oh my gosh.
How do you say that word again?
I say Thyatira. So
Thyatira. I'm so
I
bad with
apologize to all you Thyatirans out there if we are saying it wrong.
I'm so bad with language. Thyatira was an inland city. So far we've looked at coastal cities,
Right.
but it was located about 50 miles from the Mediterranean coast and is the smallest city in this grouping of 7.
And these churches, by the way, were along, you believe were along the road, the Romans road route?
Postal
or
route, which is
postal
why
route
they
there
were
it is.
chosen.
Okay, so that's
So in New Testament times, this city, this small city, was known as the center for cloth dyeing. And it was the heart of what's known as the indigo trade, which is basically what our jeans are dyed with,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
Which is made from plants. It was quite rare and quite expensive, but the center of the textile industry in Asia Minor. So there were many trade guilds in this city, and people were rather well off, or the ones that were well off were tradesmen. There were also women that were very well off in this city because that was allowed. So Lydia, if you remember from the New Testament,
Barely.
Barely.
I know.
Yeah.
I know of her.
She met Paul sometime along the road, and she was a dealer in purple cloth.
Okay.
And it is thought that she was from this city, just to
Okay.
connect you to the New Testament.
All right.
So it's likely that the church that met in the city met in her home. I think that's interesting.
Oh, interesting.
Do you think that's interesting? I think so. So for a craftsman in this city or a craftswoman in the city, membership in a trade guild was essential to both economic life and social life. You had to be part of a trade guild.
Right.
And there were also religious festivals associated with those guilds. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So 2:18, the part of the Christ that we see, the risen and glorified Christ, are the part that has the eyes like flame of fire and feet like burnished bronze. So what, I guess, eyes of flames of fire, remember what that
Purity,
was?
like I can see who you are. I see past everything because it's like pure. And then the burnished bronze was God's kind of declaration of his empire being there before, after, and everywhere in between, never gonna shake. You can't shake it.
Great. So that the flames of fire really connects with this church because in verse 19, I know your works, their love, their faith, their service, their patience, endurance. I know that your last works are greater than your first. It seems like they're doing pretty well. They're being affirmed for their love and their faith and their service and their patience, and it's getting better over time. Isn't that interesting? But, and this is the longest condemnation to the churches, actually, this tiny church, because they're looking good on the outside, but there's some serious stuff happening within. And they are basically, what we learn is that they are tolerating, that word in verse 20, the woman Jezebel.
That woman
That is among them.
Do you think, is this the real Jezebel or is this?
No,
okay,
I don't think it's the real
That's
Jezebel.
what I figured. I was like,
yeah.
I know that name. But...
So this is not actually or likely the actual name of a person. Jezebel in the church of Thyatira or whatever is not being called out. But it's an allusion to King Ahab's wife in the Old Testament, Jezebel, who aggressively promoted the worship of the Canaanite god Baal during the time of Elijah and Elijah, if you remember that story. So basically this Jezebel, or these Jezebels, I don't know, are leading the people astray with their deception. And Jesus, with his eyes, has the ability to see the truth.
Yeah.
See the truth. Enticing people to practice fornication and eat this food of idols, which we've already talked about. This was both about worship
and work.
It was also about economics. So they're seeking to accommodate the empire because it's connected to their livelihood.
Right.
And you see it.
Right.
And so on the outside, here's the sin. They were this model church showing love, compassion, faith, whatever. They're getting better. Yet there was significant corruption happening inside the church. And the sin of the church was not the corruption. That's what's interesting. The sin of the church was allowing this corruption. Unpack that. So basically, they're turning a blind eye. They're doing pretty great, but they're turning a blind eye to this one place of the church. Let's talk about that for a second. How do we turn a blind eye to the deception in the church? Like, how do we justify that?
Well, it just depends. I mean, part of it just depends on what side of the deception we stand. If we want something to go through, we can justify it until we believe it's actually true. You know what I'm saying? And if we are against it, then we will pound it into the ground and pick out all the flaws of it, And so, yeah, I mean, we do that all the time with, the faith, whenever you're talking to your therapist, whenever I talk to my therapist about other people, and then it's like, when that question gets thrown back to me, I'm like, I know I have flaws, but it's not as,
Yes.
ultimately what I'm saying is not as bad as that person.
And what you're doing in that is you're disassociating.
Right.
So we do the same thing. Well, there's obviously deception in the church. Maybe not in a local church,
Right,
but in the broader church. And what we say is, well, that's not me.
Right.
We disassociate. So in many ways, by doing that, we turn a blind eye instead of recognizing that we have led to that deception. There's practices that we're doing that have allowed that deception.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, going back to things like slavery. There was a large part of the church that disagreed with slavery. And they're like, well, as long as I'm not participating, then that's
not my burden.
It's not my burden.
Right.
But what this is speaking is, it is your burden. It is your burden. And that's your problem. You've allowed it.
Right.
And you might be doing all this love, faith, great things, and it's getting better, but you're allowing deception to happen in a part of the church. And that is your responsibility. I find that interesting. Don't you?
Well, yeah, because it's just a reminder that we are all interconnected. It's like we all kind of think, Point Loma Community Presbyterian Church is, we just need to worry about our church. And it's like, but our church, we need to also care what Rock Church is doing, what, Point Loma Lutheran or whatever, all these different churches. We got to care about them, which feels like, gosh, being in our church is hard enough, but there is a sense that we need to understand the burdens of, other churches, and that they are also ours.
Yeah, because what happens if we don't give voice or even responsibility for deception, even if it's just happening with this person or maybe this small group of people? If we don't give voice to it, then the concern here, which I think is being brought in this letter, is that deception will permeate the whole.
Right.
Like, it's just a matter of time.
Right.
It's just a matter of time. And that's what's happened, really. We've kind of just all become deceived in many ways. Like, economics is the church didn't talk about economics for many, many, many years because it's a sensitive topic. We don't want to talk to wealthy people about their wealth. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then it hurt the church. Okay. Do you have something to say about that?
Well, I do, but it's going to be it would be a really long episode if I brought it up. So maybe I'll save it for another separate episode, because it's like interesting.
So the sin here is that they're allowing it, that the majority of the church is doing great, but they're allowing this deception. So verse 24, but to the rest of you and who are holding this teaching, and have not yet clung to the deep things of Satan, hold fast. Basically, cast out that among you, hold fast. Do not lay, and I won't lay on you any other burdens. I will give you the authority, in fact, to rule. I think this is interesting, with an iron rod. So when I think of an iron rod, like, that feels painful to me. Doesn't that seem horrible?
It's painful, but it also, there's like, they're a butt kicker is what I'm trying to say. Trying to clean it up.
But it wasn't just about, the iron rod is not just about purification and justice here. The iron rod is also about mercy and shepherding. And so that picture of an iron rod is a picture of a staff in many ways, of a shepherd. So I will, whoever one who conquers and continues to do my works, I will give authority over the nations to rule them with an iron rod. Basically, you're doing a great job showing mercy. obviously there's this deception among you and you're showing mercy.
Mm.
If you cast that out, if you stay the course and you cast out that deception, I'm going to give you the authority to show mercy to the world, to teach others how to show mercy. I think that's interesting. To teach others about mercy. Even as I have also received authority from my Father, verse 28. And to the one who conquers, I will give the morning star. This is likely Christ himself. 2 Peter calls Christ the morning star. Or it could mean a new day. I will give you a new day dawning. Either way, it's a message of hope for the future. So
that's interesting because he's saying, I'm going to give you a power or the ability to show mercy or to, be a symbol of mercy, to show mercy. But then it's like, but you have to get rid of, Jezebel. So it's like, that's because justice and mercy are really difficult for us to show.
Or more, you have to acknowledge it.
Right.
I think, remember the eyes of Christ, like seeing through things. You got to give voice to the fact that there is deception happening among you.
Right.
Give voice to it.
Right.
You can still show mercy.
Right. It's like, because we either say give voice and not show mercy or show mercy by not doing anything. And it's like, how can you be, it's like, it's that whole, how can God be both justice and mercy? And that's the tension we have to walk in.
Right. So anyway, it's like, you're not acknowledging that there's deception. And I think, we do that a lot as a church, we don't acknowledge, we just kind of ignore it. Okay. All right. So that's the letter to that church. And then we keep going. One more. Sardis.
To that church. I love it. It's Thyatira. Just say Thyatira. Anyway, the message
this one's tough, by the way. This church is tough.
All right. And to the angel of the church in Sardis, write, these are the words to him who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know your works. You have a name of being alive, but you are dead. Wake up and strengthen what remains and is on the point of death. For I have not found your works perfect in the sight of my God. Remember then what you received and heard. Obey it and repent. If you do not wake up, I will come like a thief, and you will not know at what hour I will come to you. Yet you have still a few persons in Sardis who have not soiled their clothes. They will walk with me dressed in white, for they are worthy. If you conquer, you will be clothed like them in white robes, and I will not blot your name out of the book of life. I will confess your name before my Father and before his angels. Let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Ooh. Sorry, I just hit my watch.
That's okay. It's all right. Sardis, our last church for today.
All
right. Extremely wealthy, very prominent city with a rich history on the decline. So they were located inland as well, and they were famous. They were on the decline because they were very rich and wealthy in the Persian Empire.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So they were famous for manufacturing the intricate dyeing of woolen objects and carpets. I mean, you think of Persian carpets. That's what it is. This is one of the capital cities. And so they were the first city. It's interesting to note. They were the first city to mint coins. So in many ways, Sardis was the place that means where modern money was born, which is kind of a side note, but but this combination,
that's free for you,
I know, free, but except for this combination of easy money because they had it and a loose moral environment made Sardis notoriously what was known as soft and pleasure loving. They were both apathetic and they were overly confident because of where their city was located. It was located in a terrain really that was in a valley, and they were surrounded on all sides. And so every side. And so they took for granted much of what they had because in history, there had only been 2 sneak attacks against this city. They were very guarded. They were very well protected. And so it resulted in this people that were just kind of like comfortable and complacent. Okay. So the 7 spirits and the 7 stars, that's the part of Christ we see here. What does that speak, I guess, to these people?
To him it's the holder of the 7 stars, remember, are the leaders, the angels of the churches, and so he's like the holder of them.
Yes, holder of them and holder of member of the universe.
Yep, and holder of the universe. Yeah.
So this is a picture of the completeness, I hold all the power.
Yes.
You don't hold any power, although you think you hold power because you feel like you're invincible. because of your location and your wealth. Ooh.
Okay.
Well, that's like stabbing to the heart right there.
Okay.
And then you have this reputation of being alive. But you are dead. I find that to be so. We get the impression. This was written by some commentary I read, that we are not to get the impression that Sardis, I like this, was a defunct affair with the building a wreck, the members scattered, the pastor ready to resign. It was a busy church with meetings every night, committees galore, wheels within wheels, promotion and publicity, something going on all the time. It had a reputation of being alive, awake, and going. It was as a busy church, a really busy, affluent church. Oh, a busy, affluent church that feels like they're powerful, but they're dead.
Do we have those here?
Do we have those?
Do we have those
are
in
we
America?
that church?
Remember, we're talking about other people.
That's right. So the question is, what makes them dead? That's the question. There's obviously a lot going on here. So there was another commentator that said, deadness indicates that there's no struggle, that there's no fight, that there's no persecution. It wasn't that the church of Sardis was losing some battle. A dead church has already lost the battle and the fight seems to be over. So in this letter, Jesus didn't encourage the Christians in Sardis to stand strong against persecution or against false doctrine, probably because there wasn't a significant danger of these things in Sardis. So being dead, the church in Sardis, this is what's so sad. Being dead, the church in Sardis presented no significant threat to Satan's domain. So it wasn't even worth attacking. Interesting. So yeah. Sardis was another commentary said, Sardis was a perfect model of inoffensive Christianity. That their problem was not scandalous wickedness, but a decent death. Their image said alive, but in substance, they were dead. Isn't that sad?
Oof.
What do you think caused their death?
I don't know, dude. I don't want to know because I don't want to know that I'm doing that.
No, I think a lot of our churches are like this. I think a lot of our mainline churches are like this. Yeah. What do you think has caused their death? I love that a perfect model of inoffensive Christianity.
I don't know. Yeah, because it's like maybe I'm trying to think. It's funny because I'm reading this letter. I'm like, wait, didn't we just read that in another letter? It's like they've stopped listening. They've stopped. I don't know. They've stopped. They've just tried to find a place of comfort, or it's like comfort. And if like once I find that place of comfort, I don't need to listen anymore.
Totally.
I don't know. It's just I'm trying to think of like I'm thinking of a dead church versus like what makes a church alive, and it's a church that's like. They want to listen. They want to hear. There's something deep in them that feels like we're not done yet, and so
it's almost like they've become like to go back a couple. They've become a nonprofit organization. They become a YMCA. They've become there's no spirit there.
Yeah.
So they're doing a lot of stuff, but they're self-sufficient.
Right.
In that doing.
Yeah.
Their affluence, their wealth, their protection. Oh my gosh, this is so straight to the heart.
Yeah.
I think of a lot of what's happening.
They're professional Christians.
Yep, but they're dead.
Yeah.
So verse 2 says, "Wake up." They aren't completely dead, that means.
Yeah.
That's the hope here, but almost. There's still hope. But in its history, the city of Sardis was easily conquered twice before, even though it could have easily won. And it wasn't the attacking armies which overwhelmed Sardis, but because Sardis, in their overconfidence, stopped being watchful. And so that's why this is here. So wake up. The spiritual state of the church in Sardis very much reflected the city's historical character. They have fallen asleep. They've fallen asleep. Wake up. That's intense. Do you feel like the American church needs to wake up?
Yeah, I mean, like, because when I said earlier, when I used the word professional Christians, I'm like, that's what we are. I mean, we get paid to do it, what we do. And I was just like, man, like I find so many times in my 30 years of ministry where I can see where you fall into it, where you're just kind of like,
you're just doing
you're reading
your thing.
the words, you're doing it, and I always have to, it's like good to always be reminded, even like with communion or like baptism, like even in those acts, I'm always like, oh yeah, like, right. This is a beautiful story. We're like facilitating, I don't know. It's interesting that communion and baptism, the two, the two major, things in our church, well, not things, the two sacraments, there's the word, are the things that are, in my life constantly remind me, like, it's more than just like a paycheck, and I never want it to be I never want to have that mentality, but those two things always remind me, it's like, oh, this is a beautiful story we're telling and facilitating.
And that Christ is in that
and
story. The
Christ is in
presence
that
of Christ
story,
is
right.
in that story.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
anyway.
I think also Sardis to me reminds me so much of, I think there's a lot of death. Like, I think of the European church for the most part.
For sure.
Is dead.
Oh yes, for sure.
Is dead. There's no spirit, or, and I think we're very close to becoming that way in America, that we are very busy, but are we alive? Wake up.
I wonder, which is interesting. This is this might be another episode too, is like, I wonder if like the American church will last longer than the European church because of our capitalistic, like,
connection.
Yeah. That entrepreneur, it's like, it's not because of Christ we're going to keep this thing going. It's because we're capitalists.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Whereas like in Europe, they're not necessarily a capitalistic society.
That's true.
So, I don't know. It's just, I was like,
I did read an article about that one time too.
I thought about that and I was like, I wonder if it's because
and that our Puritanism here will maintain the church in a way that it didn't. Anyway.
Anyway.
Totally different episode. Okay. So if the church does wake up though, if you conquer, verse 5, you will be clothed like them in white robes, and I will not blot your name out of the book of life. I will confess your name before my Father and before his angels. And so if the church does wake up, they will walk with me in white. This is an intimate picture of purity, but also walking with Jesus, that Jesus will become an advocate for them if they overcome the apathy of the city. So the resistance here, or the resistance or the compromise here, is not persecution, but apathy and overconfidence. That's their problem. That's how they're compromising with their apathy. Okay, I'm done. Do you have anything else to say?
Dude. So end on that note. Gosh. Okay, maybe we should do another one now. And we don't have time, but man, that's good. So so there we go. So make sure you like and subscribe to our channel, and you'll get updates, and you can go back and see old services. You can see stories in our community, worship songs, hymns, all those kind of things, not just this. Well, thank you for joining us, and we will next time finish up these letters and go enjoy that conviction. Thank you, Karla, for doing that to us. So have a good one. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.